Thanks. Thanks for all showing up. So everybody probably knows that I'm a 3D character artist, portrait artist. This is something I've kind of picked up in the last couple of years. I started doing portraits like 3 years ago. What I like about portraits is it's like a window into the subject's life. And they say behind every portrait is a self-portrait. So you're always going to learn a little bit about myself through all of my portraits. So I'm going to basically just go through all my portraits I've done. So we can just get started. So my talk's going to basically, it's going to be talking about the concepts and ideas behind my work. I'm not really going to talk about the technical stuff. Like Tran did an amazing workflow of characters just before, so I don't think I could compete with that. So I'm just going to keep to the basic ideas and the concepts. So this is my self-portrait. I did this in 2014, and for me, I think in 2014 I wanted to do something really personal. I did work before which was kind of political, and I never really connected with it, so I wanted to do something as personal as I could get, and so there's nothing more personal than like a self-portrait. And I think when you go home at the end of the day from a long day of work, you're not going to want to do work to make somebody else happy. You're not going to be like, well, this company wants to see this, so I'm going to have to model this for this company. You should always do work, for your personal work, should be personal. So for the self-portrait, since I did it for myself, I wanted to kind of express who I was. And I think that's kind of like the function of what art is supposed to be. It's supposed to express your voice in the world. You've probably seen this before. I'm not going to say it in French, but this is not a pipe. It's a representation of a pipe. So basically, the reason I'm showing you this is describes what art is. If you think about what art is, like you see a painting on a wall, it's actually just materials, canvas, like oils. That's not art. The art is in your head. It's the way how your brain assembles things and how it sees it. This is not art. The art happens in our minds. And if art happens in our minds, then it has to be very personal. Like the stuff you like it because it relates to something in your life, and something which touches you inside, which makes it feel, I don't know, you connect to it a bit more. So I quit my job in Toronto, and this is when I first started my portrait. I'm actually living in my brother's kitchen at the time, my bed. But yeah, it's kind of like a transition period for me. It's like a self-reflection time, so I thought it would be kind of cool to show this. Since portraits are kind of new, a lot of people still think like they're kind of photographs. But it's like, I think like showing breakdowns is a good way to show that they're not photographs. It kind of helps explain what it is you're looking at. Kind of shows that it's not like a press of a button. It's like, no, the computer does it. It shows that it's a human-powered thing. It's like using the computer as a tool. Some breakdowns. Our industry is like one of the first industries where you actually have to show breakdowns. Like, if you have a painting by like Rembrandt, he's not going to show you a breakdown. So my work is obviously inspired by the masters like Rembrandt, Vermeer, Caravaggio. I've been drawn to this piece so much, and I never understood why until recently. I'm always pulled into his face. And it's like, you're not going to have a conversation with somebody, you kind of look at them in the eye, and everything else kind of disappears. That kind of technique and that idea of Rembrandt did. So if you look at his hands, like they're not even painted, because it's not important. His eyes are important, that helps you, it's like tunnels you into his face. So I think that's a great technique of how to create some focus. So I took this as my inspiration for my portrait. Another technique, this is by Vermeer, Girl with the Pearl Earring. Creating backstory really helps make portraits believable. So if you notice that she's got a pearl earring, but she kind of looks like a maid. So then you start thinking like, how could a maid afford a pearl earring? And it's like, well, maybe Vermeer put it on her. Maybe he was dressing her in his wife's jewelry. And then you're thinking like, wait, he's married. Is he having like an affair? Like, what's happening? And right away, you've created a backstory. And backstory helps create believability. Like paintings like this, they've done hundreds of years ago, but you can still connect with them as if they're like people living today. You could probably feel like this right now, like, oh, I'm listening to Ian's talk. This is my brother David. He's the second portrait I did. David's an artist as well, so we've actually grown up really supporting each other. I'm just going to quickly show you some of David's work. Oh, that's some Mudbox sculpts. So this is my brother's work. This like big sculptures I would help him do the 3D aspects of this, and he always helps me like take some photo references of my subjects. So we're really supportive of each other. I won't talk too much about the contents of some of these pieces. But the reason I'm showing you David's work is I wanted to show you these pieces. So these pieces are actually portraits. David's got a different way to think of what a portrait is. He shows you a portrait by the stuff you own, like your belongings. Like how you go through an airport, you put your baggage onto the x-rays so they can see who you are. You can tell it's like this is a woman with a hair comb, some gum. She's probably like a business trip or something like that. A cameraman, he's probably going off to the wild to take some photos maybe. So it's not that far of a fetched idea, because if you think about Google, they define you by the websites you look at. This is Sharto Copley. I actually had a good conversation with him about what a portrait is. And he says it's like, people aren't as deep as you think they are. A lot of what makes us who we are is at the surface level. If you change the color of your hair, you change the clothes you wear, it's going to actually change who you are. People are going to treat you differently, and you're going to feel differently about yourself. So even though I try and like show my portraits, I try and show who they are under the skin, it's basically only the surface I can really show you, so I kind of have to pay attention to these details. So some artists who actually think about identity, artists like Ron Muick, he plays with the scale. These are actually, when you see them in real life, they are very believable. It kind of plays with your mind a little bit, how real they are. Evan Penny, you'll like stretch out a face, but you look at it and you still think it's a real human being. Chuck Close, he paints as if they were like in pixels, which I think is kind of an interesting idea with digital technology, because you can zoom in, whereas in like a painting, if you wanted to zoom in, you get way too close. So we're zooming in past the human eye can actually see. Anthony Gormley, I think this guy is an amazing artist. So he doesn't actually paint the external self. He only focuses on sculptures of the internal self. So this might be like if you've had too much coffee in the morning. Yes, that might be how you feel. So this is a portrait of Heidi. This is David's wife. So for this one, I kind of wanted to show themes of strength. I didn't want her to be like, like sometimes you see on ArtStation, like the women in bikinis. I wanted something strong and a woman of power. So I did some references. I looked online and found some references I really liked. This one is one of my favorite references for themes of strength. It's by Artemisia Gentileschi. I just want to give you a little bit of the backstory about this painting. So Gentileschi, she was in her father's studio, and her father got a man called Tassi to help teach her how to paint. But instead of teaching her how to paint, he ended up raping her. And so she was like, I'm not having this, I'm going to tell the authority. So the authority took her and they tortured her. They put like thumbtacks into her fingernails and saying, you're lying. When they found out she was telling the truth, they went to Tassi and like, don't do that again, okay? And they let him off the hook. Then she painted this. So I see this as like a self-portrait of her work. This is probably Tassi. This is Gentileschi. So she put her own emotions and her own feelings into the work. And I think by putting your own emotions into your own work, it really is going to make it more, it's like the strength of it's going to feel a lot more believable. Caravaggio painted the same scene. Caravaggio's a phenomenal artist, but there's no comparison to which one's better. This one feels way stronger, more powerful. But I didn't want to go too crazy with the themes of strength, so I took some reference from Andy Warhol's poster. My other brother, my younger brother. So for this one, I want to talk a little bit about the Uncanny Valley. So last year, Chris Nichols had an amazing talk about the digital human and like what actually some of the rules about what makes people people. So there's like a list of things we add from what we know consciously. We will put it into our digital doubles. We're like, we know this, we know this. But a lot of when we see people, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. And like subconsciously, we can see like the blood flow in their faces or the heart pumps. In MIT, they actually developed technology to make you see this. So they'll take a video of this guy and they'll amplify the subtlest movements. And when they amplify it by 100 times, you can actually see the blood flowing through the guy's face. So if we add techniques like this into our digital humans, it might help a little bit. It's a little bit of the composition. So Richard's an animator. He's been an animator for 12 years now. So for Richard, I got thinking about movement and how does movement make them feel more believable. So for Richard's portrait, he's actually looking at a William Turner painting. And you can kind of imagine that he's kind of like, he's looking at the painting, you've interrupted him, he's turned around, engaged in you, then he's going to turn around. Even though it's only like a 4-second timeline, it's like you've captured 1 second of that. You've created a before and you've created an after. And it might make it feel more believable because you're never going to get a character in a T-pose who feels believable. If you saw a human being just stood like this, you'd be like, there's something not quite right. It was referenced by a Rembrandt painting, a little inspired. This is my mom. She actually wasn't too happy with the portrait, but I think it's quite nice. So, my reference for my mom was, she's my mom. Obviously, I have to paint her like a queen. So, like roughs like this would take hours to set. Like, if you're wearing a ruff like this around the neck, you're obviously of wealthy status. And if you're wearing a gold dress, you're obviously very high status. It's like I find clothes are the quickest way to judge somebody. I know you're not supposed to judge somebody, but it's impossible not to use. You judge as soon as you see their clothes. It's like one of the first things you notice. So I think through my work, I want to actually focus a little bit on how clothes relate to seeing who somebody is. So you can see, like I obviously referenced the ruff with the scarf, like the arms and stuff. But I also posed her like she was a queen. There's, like, with Richard's portrait, there's a before and after. This one, there is no before and after, because I wanted you to feel like I actually painted her like that, as if she was sat down for quite some time, how an actual queen would probably in the past. And I just painted her. That's what I wanted to feel. And the composition, I try to keep everything in the frame. This is my dad. So for him, I'm just going to talk a little bit about like how technology has changed. My dad is an engineer, he's a draftsman. So these are actually the work he used to do. Like these are actually his drawings he did as well. And I find it crazy how much has changed since when he was going to work to how we're going to work. I feel like now, like there's so many images that it's hard to contemplate a work. If you went to a gallery and you saw a piece on the wall, you'd probably spend some time looking at it. Hundreds of years ago, you'd have to like saddle up your horse and go and like, it would actually be a trip to go see it. Now you can just look at it next. and you think about it a little bit less. So for this piece, I kind of wanted to create some contemplation for you to be patient, take your time, and just kind of look at it. Like if you want to have a connection with a digital human, it's almost like a relationship with a human being. You're not going to just have it instantly. You're going to talk to them, get to know them, and that's how relationships develop. If we want digital humans to feel real, we, in a way, have to treat them like that. It's inspired by The Thinker. This is a portrait of Heather. This is Richard's wife. So for this portrait, Heather wasn't actually, I wasn't sure if she actually liked it or not. I can't decide if she actually thought it looked like her or if it didn't look like her. It reminded me of when I was working at a company. I modeled a character, and it was like 1-to-1 for the photo reference. And I just could not get it approved. No matter how many revisions I had, I could not get it approved. And then I realized that the person I was modeling was kind of an ugly person. So I just made him good looking, and it was approved instantly. Which brings me to a pretty good point, though, because what's more important when you're doing a portrait? Is it flattery or accurate representation? If you're going to do like for flattery, it's not actually going to be the person. It's going to be like this romanticized, idealistic version of them, but that's not who they are. So you want to keep it based on reality. So I'm still like torn between the two, because you obviously, when you see my work, I want you to be able to say, oh, that's sitting in Spriggs. But if I do that, I'm putting myself, and it's kind of taking away from who she is. So I'm just trying to find with my work like a good balance. So talking about accurate representation, I find that even like photographs aren't complete accurate representations either. This is a Migrant mother by Dorothea Lange. You can this is during the Great Depression, you can really feel the hardship she has to go through. And you feel like this is a photo, so it's reality. But you don't know exactly what she went through. The photo works so well because it makes you imagine how hard her life might have been at this point in time. That's not true representation. It's kind of like this romanticized, like, it's creating that imagination for you. I think this piece is like amazing to be able to do that. So Heather was inspired by Goya. I think this is another Goya. Yeah, this is another Goya painting. What I like about this is Goya has this really good way of playing between representation and romanticizing something. So he basically did a beautiful portrait of the ugly truth. So Goya can paint beautifully, but he intentionally made them look ugly. So there's my friends Graham and Amanda. For this one, this is my first double portrait. So I wanted to see how two people react, because I think a lot of what makes us human is how we react with other people. So I didn't focus just on one of them. It's almost like a static dance. Like everything about Amanda's in straight lines, everything about Graham is in curves, loose clothing. So it's kind of like that opposite, but yet they're on the same page, on the same canvas. It's inspired by a Sargent painting. There we go, you can see the idea from my composition. The thing with double portraits is just twice as much work, because you get two people. Sometimes sometimes I think I should stick with a single portrait. Oop, did I skip one? Hold on a second. We're missing an image. So this is a portrait of Neil Blomkamp. I'm not sure where the color version is. But everything on this piece, I did it to make you focus on Neil Blomkamp. I actually worked at Oat Studios with him. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Shall we talk about that now? So I worked here I still kind of work here. But what I like about the studio is Neil Blomkamp's created like a vibe of like a really creative environment for the artist to really strive. And some of the work I did while I was there, I'm not going to talk too much about this. I just wanted to show you the different spectrums of my career. This was a fun model to do, the zygotes. The rig was absolutely insane. Eric Laguerre rigged every single finger by hand, one by one. Okay, so the portrait of Neil. I liked his artistic vision. I liked what he was doing at Oates, so I was like, Neil, let me do your portraits. He was like, sounds good. So everything about Neil, he knew what he wanted from Oates, and I wanted to express that in a portrait of him. So I had him looking directly at you. His clothes, the background of black, so you were focused on him, because I wanted to represent him focused. One important thing about Neil's portraits is that I had two hens in there, and they were front and center. In paintings in the past, if you have two hens in a painting, this means that you're rich, because if you can only afford it, because they take so long to do. If you have one hand, you're relatively rich. If you have no hands, it's because you can't afford them. Since Neil's the top director, or one of the best directors I've met, I had two hands in there. And talking about hands can really express so much. Sometimes a face might lie, and you can like hide your emotions. The truth always comes out in the hands, and I feel like not enough character artists pay attention to what the hands are actually doing. Some hands in the past, like you can feel like the tension and the like despair this sculpture of Bernini is going through. You don't even need to show the face because the hands are way more expressive. Everyone's seen these hands before. Death of Marat. You can feel like the hand's dead. Hand of David, you can feel the strength. The Mona Lisa. If you start paying attention to what the hands are saying, you can really read a lot into it. So this is Neil Blomkamp's brother and sister. I wanted to do a portrait of them because they're actually twins. Every single human being has the same anatomy. They have ears, eyes, nose, but there's subtle differences which makes us unique. I wanted to just play with that idea by doing a pair of twins, one male and one female. So inspired by William Rothenstein. The only problem I have with this picture is I did a photo shoot. I always do a photo shoot of my portraits, of my subjects. I'll do like the whole 360. That's how I model. I'll do like a photo shoot with the lighting and different poses. But when it comes to them, I did a photo shoot of them on 2 different days. So I did Stephanie first, then the next day I did Mike. And I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect because you don't actually feel like they're on the same page. So it's just one of those learning experiences, which next time I'm going to make sure if I do a double portrait, they're going to stay together. This is one of my friends, Steve Wang. We worked at Oates together. He's a concept artist. We talked a lot about what makes for good art and what makes for bad art. We'll go through ArtStation and we're like, we like this one is a little bit weaker. We kind of try to figure out what made it good and what made it bad. And there's like a lot of rules, which are kind of unwritten rules, but we kind of all we all agree on it. Like stuff like the golden ratio, the complementary colors. Like they're not set in stone, but we all kind of agree on the same page. So I've had a lot of conversations with people about what's good art and what's bad art. And a lot of people say abstract's bad art, it's not very good. But for something to be good art, it needs to achieve its goal. So for a digital human, for it to achieve its goal, it's got, like, if you want it to be photorealistic and it falls short, it's not amazing art. It's okay art, but artwork has always got to achieve what it's trying to strive. Jackson Pollock's work was done during the Cold War. He wanted to show free ideas, free thinking, free speech, which contradicted what Russia was at the time. If you actually could see like a cat or a dog, it wouldn't work. You'd be able to say, well, it's not free because I can see a cat. So therefore, it wouldn't be good artwork. But the fact that it represents those ideas so well, it works. Notice how Steve Wang's got his hands in his pockets because he couldn't afford them. So this is another friend of mine I worked at Oates with. Everything about this portrait was about the eyes. Like from the colors, everything is yellow, orange, his eyes were blue to create the contrast. I wanted you to feel like you're not looking at him, he's looking at you. And everything I did was to try and strengthen that idea. I remember when I first started modeling, my supervisor would say, I spent 2 weeks just modeling the eyes, and I thought that was overkill. But after 2 weeks, I'd be like, all right, what do you think of these eyes? And he's like, that's way better. And I would compare it to my first version 2 weeks before, and I could see, like, before I was kind of guessing and generalizing what I thought the eyes actually looked like. So everything is about the eyes. I came across this photographer who took photos of soldiers before, during, and after war. Before the war, they looked a little bit tired, sleepy. During the war, they look very focused, sharp. And then after the war, there's a little bit of a combination. And I was like, well, how does that, like, what exactly is it about that which makes these eyes look so focused? And I noticed there's a lot more contrast. There's a higher specular light, there's more, you can see the sclera a little bit. And because there's more contrast, it creates a more focused eye. It pulls you in a little bit more. So I took that technique and I put it into Sean's eyes. Everything, even the composition, everything was like a bullseye pulling you towards his eye. Steve McCurry's, this is the cover of National Geographic. Her eyes are so intense that it actually makes you feel a little bit vulnerable. It pulls you into the image. So it's definitely one of the references for my work. This is Neil commissioned me to do a portrait of his sister and his nephew. This was an incredibly challenging one, mainly because Gabriel, he's a kid. Doing the photo shoot of him, he was like kind of moving around, and he wasn't like, I couldn't get a good capture of him. Hold a second. So I did a lot of research and looking at kids throughout art history, and I always wondered why they're so ugly. So I came across some pretty good images I thought you'd kind of like, so I thought I'll share them. I'll absolutely think that one's great. It's kind of like, I don't know what's going on with this little guy. This is my personal favorite one. Absolutely hideous. So I found some of those, but then I came across some a little bit better mother and son portraits by Gustav Klimt. I really like this one because you really feel the love between the two. And after seeing all these paintings and references, I noticed that a mother and son in pictures, the skin is always touching. They're always touching each other. Picasso, you can feel the love between the two of them. Then I came across some much better ones more recently. Like you can feel like this kid is just like outside playing, and he's just come inside to hang out with his mom. I love this one by Sargent. You can feel like that kid does not want to be here. He's absolutely sick of being painted. His mom's lecturing him. It gives you a very real idea of who this kid is. So I try to incorporate some of those ideas. The hands, I actually did, when I did the photo shoot of them, they had the hands separate. They weren't touching each other. So I ended up adding this into like the very last minute, just a little bit of skin contact. It wasn't until after I finished my portrait until I discovered this piece. And I kind of wish I just saw this first because I absolutely love this piece. The hands are touching. She's leaning into her. She's like looking at you. She's a little distracted. It's very similar, but I think there's a couple of techniques I could have made a little bit better. I could have let Gabriel lean into her a little bit more. I could have created a little bit more of a connection. I'm not a father, so I found it quite hard to show that type of relationship. This portrait of Tony. I've been friends with him for 15, 16 years now, since college. So with Tony, I was like, Tony, I want to pose you like, actually, hold on a second, there's some other things. Yeah, I'll just quickly show you the breakdown of him first. So it just gives you an idea of my workflow, how I build stuff up. So there's nothing crazy, there's no magic buttons I'm doing, it's just the steps you kind of would expect. There we go. So for Tony, he was inspired by Gustav Courbet, Le Desperate. I tried to pose, like when I was taking a photo shoot of Tony, I tried to pose him like he's stressed out. Oh, like, Tony, hold your hair like this. And I was trying to control him too much. And then after a while, like of him getting sick of me, he just kind of was like, press his hands behind his back. I'm like, Tony, don't move. It's like a whole bunch of photos of him. And I think it kind of turned out pretty well. So it sounds kind of weird, but a lot of my inspiration for Tony, I did like a little bit of research on like Instagram and like what do people click on, like what do people like. So I noticed like there's like bright colors, kind of like tattoos and stuff like this. So I kind of try to make it more like a little bit more mainstream. So it's a little bit different than my other pieces of work. But as I was going through Instagram, I came across, actually Chris Nichols also emailed me a link to some like digital doubles who are on Instagram who have like a life. So they have like, they're completely kind of, they're not good digidoubles, but there's so many images of them, it's almost like they're a real person, they've created a life for these people. So the way I do my work is like I show one image to create a story and create believability. They just skip the realism and just show tons of images by creating a story. That's how they create a story, they just skip this, and you kind of just accept these images. You don't really contemplate them, you just kind of accept it. And seeing these digidoubles on Instagram, it got me thinking, like, where are we heading? Once we get to the perfect digital human being, are we going to be using these to, like, for advertisements, like for like avatars we hide behind, for actors to live forever? And I think we need to ask some moral questions when it comes to digidoubles, because we don't want to make the perfect digital double just so we can become like less human. So the more human they become, we can become a little bit more fake. So I think as we move forward, we should try to question what we're doing with these digital doubles and try and be as truthful as we can about who we are, who we're representing. So I actually have something pretty exciting. I actually have a new portrait to show you, so you guys are going to be the first ones to ever see it. This is a portrait of Cassidy. It's commissioned from a friend of their daughter. It's loosely inspired by the Mona Lisa. Everything I did with her was to try to get soft. Like everything is in like, There's no hard straight lines. This is a little bit of the breakdown. So this piece is actually going to be on the cover of 3D World, and I promised them I wouldn't release it until June 13th. So if you can take photos, but just if you could just restrain from posting them online until like 2 weeks from now. So it was kind of inspired loosely by the Mona Lisa. So what I like about the Mona Lisa is like we think we know it, but it's like how much do we really know it? Like have you ever noticed that she doesn't really have eyebrows? The background is like higher on one side than the other. It's like, is this piece like really genius? Or do we like it because we're told it's really good? And I think how we perceive art is an interesting subject. The Mona Lisa was stolen in 1911, and they thought Picasso stole it, but he hadn't. But when the piece was not in the Louvre anymore, people actually came to the Louvre, dropped off flowers and remembrances, and then they found it, and they brought it back to the Louvre, and people celebrated it. Like, it became the first mass icon in art history ever. So it's like, was it marketing which made us like it, or did we like it before? This is actually when I went to the Louvre 8 years ago. I couldn't even get close to it because it was so popular. So what makes things like so popular like this? This is another Leonardo piece. This sold for $450 million the other week. It's like, how is it worth so much money? And then Rembrandt. Everybody loves Rembrandt. But what if I told you this is not Rembrandt? This is actually his pupil, William Drost. Is it, when you thought it was Rembrandt, you know who Rembrandt is, everyone loves Rembrandt. But as soon as they found out it's not Rembrandt, is it as good? It's almost like it steps down in quality. We're like, oh, it's not Rembrandt. I don't like it as much. But when you thought it was Rembrandt, you loved it. So like, what is this idea? Why do we like stuff so much? Is it, we like to think like what we see on the surface is what we like, but there's a story behind it we also want to know. France, the Terrace Museum in France learned that 82 out of the 140 paintings in the collection were fake, which I thought was kind of sucks for them, but it's kind of funny too. But it's kind of got me thinking, it's like, how does all this stuff relate to human, like the digital humans? So I'm asking, like, how do we perceive art? It's impossible to detach the visual from, like, the thought and the story of it behind. It's not a question of if it's fake or not. It's a question of the story behind it is fake or not. We want to know it's real. We like Leonardo, we like Rembrandt because we know who they are. We can relate to them. We've seen their work before. We feel like we know them. If it's not their work, we start questioning it. And when it comes to digital human beings, it goes much deeper than the faces. We want to know the stories. We want to know the artist behind it. We want to know what's behind the portrait. We just want to know that it's all real. That's my talk.